All right, outside the presence of the jury having now been excused, are there any matters that we need to take up before we move on to a sentencing proceeding in this case?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right. And do you have a prior record worksheet just for my purposes?
I do, Your Honor. If I may approach.
Yes, please.
It reflects that Mr. Holden is a felony level 1. It's been signed by both myself and Mr. Brown.
So is this, Mr. Brown, Ms. Hamburger, is it stipulated that your client's prior record level 1 based on one prior record point?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is the state prepared to pray judgment at this time?
We are, Your Honor.
All right. I'll hear from the state first, then I'll hear from the defense.
Thank you, Your Honor. In regards to sentencing, we would ask that you give the defendant in this case, Nathan Holden, 2 consecutive life sentences to reflect the victims in each case, Sylvester Taylor and Anglia Taylor. We'd ask for consecutive life sentences there. In regards to the beating and shooting that LaTanya Allen suffered, that would be a B1 felony. We would ask that you sentence him at the top of the presumptive range to 240 months to 300 months to run consecutively to the 2 life sentences that the court is obligated to impose in this case. Your Honor, that is the request of the state. We do have victim impact evidence. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, and there was also an assault charge regarding LaTanya, the assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, inflicting serious injury. We'd ask that you arrest judgment on that matter. Those are the sentencing recommendations on behalf of the state. Mr. Lively is going to introduce a few people to you in terms of victim impact evidence. Your Honor, I would briefly just ask to take the opportunity to thank the Taylor family. They have been a very kind and sweet family, and just an absolute pleasure to work with. LaTanya, Jamar have been great, and Sylvester Taylor Jr. and the manner in which he's conducted business in this courtroom is one of the greatest things I've ever seen a victim do in a case. So I just would like to acknowledge them and thank them for their support that they've shown and the courage that they have shown throughout this trial.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lively?
Your Honor, I want to echo that. The Taylors are exceptional people who have had to deal with an exceptional tragedy as the basis of these crimes, but they have shown grace in dealing with this, and we thank them and continue to feel for them, and would like for you to hear a little bit of victim impact before you make a decision as to sentencing. You'll hear from Sharon Johnson and Marktonia Royster. Sharon is the sister of Anglia Taylor. Ms. Johnson.
Ms. Johnson, if you'll come have a seat here, we're not going to swear you in, but I would like to hear what you have to say. Just make yourself comfortable, and when you're ready to tell us what you have to say or read a statement, we'll be glad to hear from you, Ms. Johnson. Wait one moment. It may be that bailiff is going to have some people join us. Go ahead, ma'am.
Standing in my sister Angie's driveway, seeing all the police lights, waiting with my baby sister to hear the worst possible news we could have ever imagined. Leaving there to go to my parents' home to break the news to them, calling my nephew and my brothers to tell them what had happened, then trying to explain it all to my own children, rushing to the hospital, waiting and praying as Tanya fought for her own life, seeing the pictures and hearing the testimonies during this trial. These are sounds and images that my family and I would never forget. They will be with us for the rest of our lives because of a decision that Nate made on April 9th, 2014. That night, my brothers and sister and I lost our oldest sister. My aunts and uncle lost their oldest niece. My parents lost their firstborn, and the members of Zion Hill Holin's Church lost their pastor. This tragic loss not only had a profound effect on T, Tanya, Jeremy, Nautica, and Amber, but it had a traumatic impact on many other lives as well. The loss of my sister has left such a void in our family. We still find ourselves struggling to try and fill the space she left behind, only to repeatedly come to the realization that it can never be filled. There is no substitute that is sufficient to take her place. My sister Angie was the most genuine, gentle, compassionate, loving, and giving person I knew. Her life was valuable to us and to so many others that depended on her for an encouraging word, companionship, and spiritual guidance. She always found a way to make life a little easier to live, and without her, our lives are heavier. My sister was not just a victim, she was someone who loved deeply, and in return was deeply loved and admired and will be missed every day. One choice made on one night has altered our lives forever.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Mr. Lively?
Your Honor, next, I'll call Martonio Royster. This is the son of Sylvester and Anglia Taylor and the brother of Sylvester Jr. and LaTanya.
Sir, Mr. Royster, as soon as you're comfortable, feel free to tell us what you need to tell us, sir.
I've been through a lot of stuff, but losing my daddy and Angie, the way they left here, is by far one of the worst things I've ever experienced in my life. My father was not involved much in my life in my early years, but as I became a teenager and was able to drive, I made it my business to start visiting him and getting to know my brother and sister. And that was a joy to my heart because it began to fill a void that I had felt all of my life. And the older I got, the more I visited, the more I spent time with them, the more I understood myself. Everybody says I look like them, talk like them, walk like them, act like them. I didn't know that. I had to go on their word until we start spending more and more time together. And the older I got, the more time we spent together, the more I could see myself and understand myself. I was raised by a Vietnam veteran. The man that raised me was a Vietnam veteran. So as I got to know my dad more, I saw the total similarities between the two of those men. So I understood my father more because I had learned to understand the man that raised me. And why do I say that? A picture of my father's been painted in this courtroom that he was just some monster. And I beg to differ that tremendously. My father had much love in his heart for everybody. He would bend over backwards to help anybody. He would give you his last dime if you needed it. I remember times when Nate and Tanya needed a car or something to drive, and he would give up one of his. He did that on numerous occasions. And I know that because we stayed in contact all the time. We talked almost every day, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a day, depending on what was going on. My dad became my best friend. he became my best friend, and I saw the heart of gold that has been neglected to be talked about in this courtroom during this case. I remember one time when he was real proud of Nate. He started going to church. My dad told me how he was starting to help in the videotaping of the services. And I saw and heard a satisfaction in his voice and in his heart that he was glad to see those things taking place in Nate's life. Yeah, they bumped heads a lot, but what father doesn't bump heads with a man who he's getting the impression that, okay, you can do better than what you're doing? My father was stern, but he was fair. He had a low tolerance for foolishness, but he had a great big heart that would turn around and help you the moment you showed that, hey, I want to make a change. I want to do something different. I want to do something worthwhile. That's the man I knew. This loss has left such a big hole in my mornings because we talked every day. After I would talk to my mother, I would call him, and these conversations would always start off with a laugh or something funny, or talking about the eggs and coffee that he and I both were enjoying in two different places. And my mornings now, during that time, I can't do nothing but talk to God, because that's the only way I've been able to get through it. He was the biggest supporter of his wife. I call her Mama Angie. Numerous times I would call and they would be on the way somewhere that he would be driving her to go minister. He was the head deacon at their church. I can remember one instance where I was passing through Roseville on the way to a job site and called him, and he said, "Where you at?" I said, "I'm passing through Roseville." I said, "Where you at?" He said, "Under the church." I said, "What?" He said, "Come on by here." So I went by there, and it was 98 degrees, and he was at that church by himself. He had the floor jacked up, and he was replacing the floor joists where they had rotted and the floor had sunk on the front side of the church by himself. I helped as long as I could, but I was on a time schedule. But I said, man, what a man it has to be to do that kind of work by himself for his church and his church family. That's the Sylvester Taylor that I knew. And to lose a man like that on my birthday was the biggest blow I've ever experienced in my life. Just 3 hours after I talked to him. His wife, Mama Angie, was the sweetest, one of the sweetest women I knew. And it is a shame and a tragic loss to our families, the Smith and Taylor family, to the community, to the church, because they reached out to any and everybody. It didn't matter what you were, who you were, what you were doing. They reached out to everybody. Now, my dad wouldn't hesitate to call you out and tell you the truth about yourself. But he meant well. And had he wanted to do Nate any harm, he would have done it years ago. But that's not what was really in his heart. This man served 2 tours in Vietnam, and his job was to kill. So he knew how to do it perfectly. But harming you is not what he really wanted to do. Don't really know what else I can say. But being that you have the chance to live more of your life, I know that David wants you to get your heart right with God. That's the whole reason you're still here. Because if God saw intent for you to be gone, you would already be gone. So I say in this stead, God loves you. Jesus loves you. He died and paid the price for your life. Submit to him and get your heart right.
Thank you, Mr. Royster.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Lively, Mr. Waller?
Your Honor, that's the victim impact statement. I would just say it's clear these crimes have significantly impacted this family and this community. And we'd ask that your verdict or that your punishment reflect that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Brown, Ms. Hamburger, for the defense.
Just briefly, Your Honor. I do want to continue to express what I think we tried to express during the trial, but you express now that our hearts go out to the Taylor family, to LaTanya, to the children, to everything that they have gone through. We do realize that this has been a tremendous tragedy for everybody, and nothing we've ever tried to say or do as any means tried to undermine that at all. And I don't think that, and I think I speak for the entire team and for Nate and for everybody when we say that. I would like to thank the jurors for both the service and their compassion today. Just take a brief moment to thank Nate's family. I've been doing this work a long time. It's not easy for families to come up here and talk about, and truthfully talk about all the problems and all that they have, and to do it in a courtroom, especially when it's being televised to the community. And it was painful for them, but they did it because it was the truth, and they did it because they love they love Nate. And I have, in these 3 years, I'm going to spend a lot of time with Nate. It's been a learning process, like a lot of them and all, but I think what I really have found is what happened on that night is really out of character for him. He's really does not define him. He really is, and at heart has been, and as horrible as those tragedies been a decent person. We'd ask that in consideration we will just resubmit all the mitigating circumstances that we submitted to the jury.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, if you'd come around here. Well,
It'll be short.
yes, sir, go ahead, please.
I'll be remiss if I didn't mention my sister. Jackie, we have an older sister, so I can be a soul with me. And she got to meet my father for the first time exactly 1 year before this incident happened. And this has been extremely hard for her son and daughter. And she lived in Philadelphia. She was here for the beginning of the trial, but you know this has flipped her world upside down, because the father she thought she was getting ready to know extensively. After all these years, it was just ripped from underneath her. And then my father had his first great grandchild the following month. And just want to say, Jackie, we love you, and we keep praying for you all too.
Thank you, Mr. Royster. Anything further for the defense? Thank you. All right, Mr. Holden, if you'll stand for me, sir. The jury has returned verdicts of guilty of first-degree murder of Anglia Taylor, guilty of first-degree murder of Sylvester Taylor, guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, inflicting serious injury with the intent to kill of LaTanya Allen, and attempted first-degree murder of LaTanya Allen. Those verdicts have been accepted by the court and recorded. The jury has also returned its recommendations with respect to the two offenses of first-degree murder, and I'm going to impose those judgments in accordance with law. So for the first-degree murder of Anglia Taylor, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the first-degree murder of Sylvester Taylor, I sentence you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For the attempted first-degree murder of LaTanya Allen, I sentence you to 240 months minimum, 300 months maximum in the custody of Division of Adult Corrections. That's within the presumptive range based on a prior record level 1 on one prior record point. Those sentences are to run consecutive to one another, and you are remanded to the custody of the Division of Adult Corrections. I also want to take a moment just to thank counsel for an excellent job of advocacy. We ask counsel in cases like this to provide vigorous prosecution and vigorous defense, to present all of the facts and the evidence in a way that the jury can make a determination of the appropriate verdicts and the appropriate penalty. I feel confident in saying that that has happened in this case with respect to the advocacy of counsel. We've seen excellent advocacy, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Your Honor, we would, for the record, enter notice of appeal to the North Carolina Court of Appeals.
Yes, sir. Counsel, the appellate defender will be appointed to represent Mr. Holden from this point forward. Notice of appeal is noted by the court. Is there anything further for the court?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. We'll be in recess. This court is in recess, sine die.
All rise. The United States Superior Court for the County of Wake is now adjourned. Signing die. God save the state and solemn court.
They finish off with the Yeah.